You're one of the true innovators of the retail industry, founder, former CEO of Build-A-Bear, a company that you grew from one location to currently just under 500, doing close to 500 million in revenue as well. You're also the developer of this wonderful building that we're sitting in, the Delmar Divine.
And that's another thing that I tell people, that there are a lot of businesses that there's an owner looking to sell that business. And you could take it, an existing business and something that you're interested in, and turn it into a 21st century business. People want to have an experience. And there are all kinds of experiences. When you check into a hotel, how they treat you, and when you go to an airport, how they treat you. And some of those are pretty lousy. And before you get to the hotel of your dreams, you've had 14 missteps because of the airport and the traffic and whatever. How does that turn into something positive? And we all have a big challenge in that. But that's the fun of it, is wowing the customer.
Maxine, thank you for taking the time. I do appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Glad to meet you.
You're one of the true innovators of the retail industry, founder, former CEO of Build-A-Bear, Build-A-Bear Workshop, a company that you grew from one location to currently just under 500, doing close to 500 million in revenue as well. You're also the developer of this wonderful building that we're sitting in, the Delmar Divine, which we will get into. You left Build-A-Bear in 2013 to kind of pursue passion projects, is maybe how I would put it. Would love to hear from you how you would put some of the projects you're working on or have worked on since Build-A-Bear. And you're originally from Miami, Florida, but I take it that you are a proud St. Louis resident today.
Yes, I am. Proud St. Louis resident. But I'm also proud to be from Miami, Florida, which is a culturally diverse, incredible city. Growing up there during the incredible and large, immigration of people from Cuba mostly, but also Latin America, Haiti, the islands in between. And it was wonderful to be able to grow up around so many people that came with unique stories.
I think the way I've heard you put it is you grew up in what felt like a village or a really tight-knit community. With you being a first-generation American, can you kind of give us some background on what life was like for you growing up?
My parents were first generation,
Okay.
But I'm the first generation to go to college. So it was a wonderful, right after the war in the 50s and 60s, when little towns were emerging here in St. Louis and in Miami, Florida, thanks to the GI Bill and investment in communities, people were able to build small houses for their families with whatever the modern conveniences were at the time and start their family. And schools were popping up everywhere. You went to your neighborhood school. The school bus came and stopped right in front of your house, no matter what street you lived on. And even if you came home from school and your parents weren't there, somebody was looking out the window for you. You didn't even have to lock your doors. Your dog could run freely and, come back home. And certainly when you rang the doorbell, they'd hear you and they come running or barking. It was just a different time. It doesn't mean it can't be somewhat the same now. It's just so different because kids, especially in St. Louis, don't necessarily go to their neighborhood school. They may not go to school on a bus. A school may not have a bus because they can't afford it. Or it's a private school. St. Louis has a very large percentage of children in private, parochial, or homeschooled. So it changes not only the democracy of education, making it affordable for everyone to go to a high-quality school, it changes the relationships that you might have with kids in your neighborhood because you go to school maybe 10 miles away, and that's your friends.
That's a great point. And I'm sure the way you grew up was in some way an inspiration for the Delmar Divine development, because you mentioned in a previous interview that you grew up in a place that had mixed incomes and, like you said now, a lot of diversity. And I think that's what you're trying to do here. I could be wrong. Yes. There's another piece that you mentioned as well from your childhood. It was a story of you losing a beloved teddy bear. And you mentioned that reflecting back on the way you grew up and your childhood, that could have been a piece of the inspiration for Build-A-Bear. Would you mind sharing that story? I thought it was a phenomenal story that really gives us the importance of.
Yeah, my teddy bear was my best friend next to my puppy dog, Tar, who was a black Cocker Spaniel. We would come home. I loved to read. And my teddy bear got to hear all my books because I would read out loud to him. And my dog and my teddy bear heard all my secrets. But I don't know why. It was given to me as a child, and he was with me till I was about 10 years old. And we went out. I took him everywhere. I mean, I didn't take him to school, but I did take him everywhere that we went as a family. And we were going out to dinner with our next door neighbors, and I took him, and he was in the back of the car, and I left him in the seat of the car. And when I came back to go into the house at night after we were back in our driveway, he wasn't there. And I thought, well, did I leave him at the restaurant? And I realized that something happened, and I know my dad was trying to get me to stop with my teddy bear because I used to read in bed and suck my thumb, and my teddy bear would be right there. So I think he thought if the teddy bear was gone, I would stop doing that, and I wouldn't have to have braces when I was, older. And but I missed him. But I think it was time. I look back on it now, and it was an important time. And I was always looking for him wherever I went. Like I looked to see if any child was holding him or anybody else had found him. And no, that was just a story. That was just a part of my life. But all the things that happen to you in your life are part of your life. One of the things that we did in my elementary school was go on field trips, and we walked to some of them because the bakery was around the corner, and not too far away was a factory, and we could walk to those places. So we wondered about them, and we got to wander inside of them, and wonder and wander are close words, and we got to ask questions. And so even though I didn't want to be a baker or I didn't want to work in the other factory, I saw how things were made, and it kind of just sat with me. I was always curious about how did something get from one place to another? How did somebody make that, especially with something beautiful, whether it was clothing or a painting or a three-dimensional object? My mother was a really talented person. She had a wonderful history, but she was also a really talented seamstress. And my sister and I were tiny, and my mother was tiny, so she used to make all our clothes. And we always got lots of compliments on our clothes, which usually when your mother made your clothes, it looked like it was homemade. But my mother's clothes did not look like that. And people would always say to me, where did you get that? Where did you get that? I didn't always want to tell them, but I was very proud of my mom. But my mother also was a very unique person and had a big impact on my life. Unfortunately, she died when I was just 22 years old. But all that time that I was sitting with her at the table at night, my father was a morning person, my mother was a night person, and she would sit there and sew. And we would talk about life. My mother worked for Eleanor Roosevelt. She was one of her private traveling secretaries. And so during the time that she worked for Eleanor, which was a long time in his presidency, they would go places where they would see asylums, prisons. Sometimes they were the same thing. People in distress, poor people, because it was the Depression. And what Eleanor just wanted them to do was to work on solutions. And when Franklin died, she gave everybody a small amount of money and said, go back to your home and fix one of the problems that we saw. And so my mother and three of her friends pooled their money and went to Miami, where my father was stationed, and started a school for children with Down syndrome. But it wasn't called Down syndrome then. It was called mongoloidism. And, of course, part of the problem, the advocacy that you do in whether it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving or children that have disabilities, is you find the policies that will work, and one of them was to call it what it is, so people would understand it. In those days, children didn't even live past 16, but now they live a full and wonderful life and are mainstreamed into our society. My mother didn't get to see that, but she did create a great school that was bringing children out of hiding into a life of potential. And I think that's what we all deserve. So even though I wasn't going to be a social worker, I wanted to be a capitalist. I admired what my mother did, and I respected it. And I sometimes had to go with her when I didn't want to because I wanted to be with my friends, but I always would leave there feeling better than I went, because the hugs that the kids gave you, sitting down and coloring with them, talking with them, it was a really wonderful childhood experience. Every child should experience something that isn't them, that is someone else, and get to know them. And then in our community, it was so diverse, people coming from Latin America, particularly from Cuba, and meeting new friends all the time. That was also part of my environment. And I thought that, so when you add all that up together, losing my teddy bear, my mother caring about people and teaching us to have those kinds of concerns and respect for everyone, having friends from very diverse backgrounds, creating a neighborhood like here at Delmar Divine, it's all just full circle. And you don't know that when you're growing up. You don't know exactly, but all those things that happen for you, with your parents and your friends and your neighborhood, and on the news, by the way, impact you. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that going forward. What are children hearing? What are they seeing? What do they do? What can they do about it? And do they feel empowered, or do they just feel, scared? And for me, I felt empowered. It was also during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I've didn't want to die, of course, but I started keeping a diary like Anne Frank did in case something happened to me and somebody would find it. But it's the best tool for me to go back and see, who was that little girl? What was she thinking on whatever day we're in now, February 12th, 1965? What was I writing in my diary? And honestly, it's sometimes the same thing. I'm writing a story about a friend of mine in school who I was worried about, or somebody I cared about, or how much I love my teacher and my school and what I learned that day. And so it's not, you just grow up. You aren't necessarily a different person. You hopefully are a better person because of all the life experiences that you've had. And I definitely believe that about my life. I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice when women weren't even in the Supreme Court. I went to Florida Girls State and I was on the Supreme Court there, so that was my taste of it. But that's the kind of experiences you should have as a child, trying things, seeing things, thinking what could I be? And I wanted to be all those things. I didn't want to be a teacher, a nurse, a social worker, or a secretary. That was what women traditionally did. No offense to those, we need all those jobs, but I wanted to do something different. And being a lawyer was that road, but I had to go to work, to go to law school, and I found a different path.
Thank you for sharing. That's an incredible story. The care and inclusion that you mentioned, I think that's very evident in the way you built Build-A-Bear and then now your current pursuits like Delmar Divine, for example. So I would say, maybe it's not my place to say, but I would say you're definitely making your mother proud. And then you're welcome. And then also you mentioned curiosity. So curiosity, I think, is one of the most important traits of an entrepreneur. I think you need to be endlessly curious in order to figure out the various challenges you're going to find. There's no real roadmap for you to follow. So that curiosity, is that what led you from law to business? It sounds like you didn't grow up around entrepreneurship, really.
Well, I did, actually.
Okay.
Because my father was an entrepreneur. He was an electrician. He owned his own business.
Okay.
Although I don't think we thought of the word entrepreneur there. We just thought he was a business owner. That was the word we used. My mother created a school from nothing, so she was an entrepreneur, and it can be a nonprofit entrepreneur too. But I didn't know what that was. I just thought that was life. But I do believe that my curiosity is my superpower. I've always been a nosy person, wanting to know everything, whether it was peeking inside my next door neighbor's house and listening at the window, or listening at my parents' bedroom. I've always been wanting to know more than what I was supposed to know, and finding that out. And I think that is what propelled me from when I went to law school and had to go to work. I had to get a job. My college professor was a consultant to the retail business, and he said, "Oh, you should go into retail." That was how I knew. I thought, I know where to buy things, but I didn't know what all the, how one thing gets from another. So I went and applied for a job at the Heck Company in Washington, D.C., and I was lucky enough to get into the executive training program. My boss knew I was going to school after work. But nobody else really needed to know. And then he got sick and he had a heart attack, and he was going to be out of work for they said 6 months, but it turned out to be 9 months. And his boss asked me if I could fill in. He didn't know about the law school part. So I took a leave of absence from law school, and I'm still on that leave of absence today. And even though I've gotten 2 honorary degrees in law from WashU and St. Louis U, and those mean a lot to me because those people who gave it to me knew the story. I couldn't go and try a court, but I'm always still curious about the legal system, and we do a lot of work here in our family foundation on the mass incarceration system in America. And since Michael Brown was killed in 2014, I've learned a lot more than I would have ever known otherwise, and I tell his family that he did not die in vain. There's lots of things that have happened since that we would not have known about had that not occurred. And so they should think of the good side of what we're still thinking about and doing and trying to improve since Michael Brown left our planet.
I think it's very important that you're so involved in some of these other issues that maybe other entrepreneurs, business people don't want to publicly touch or speak on. Being vocal, it sounds like you're not afraid to be vocal. When you were entering that,
they can't fire me. I'm a volunteer. So
that's a great point.
It's true. I think when you're working and somebody else is paying your paycheck, they might have rules and regs about that. And of course, as a business owner, especially a company as high profile as Build-A-Bear, I was always really careful. But I think people, because of the nature of the company, and we're about hugs and smiles and kids and all ages, 3 to 103, I think people understood where I would stand on most issues that involved humanity.
So when you were in the corporate world, were you vocal about pushing women forward? Because I would imagine when you first entered the corporate retail world, the work environment was maybe not as inclusive as it is today. Were you on the forefront, at least within the May company or May department stores?
Women have always been in retail. People selling in lingerie or cosmetic departments or things that they thought women were more suited for. But actually, I was totally suited for it. And there were women coming up, not many at manager levels, buyer level. And one of the great things about the retail business that I've always said is it's about results. You see your sales every single day. And I didn't know how good I was going to be at it. I was right out of college. I went to work for a man who was very smart, and then he had to take time off. And one of the great things was that his all of our suppliers were so worried that this little kid, literally small and young, was going to ruin his department. And Harry would come back and he wouldn't have his bonus, and I would have destroyed. I'm sure that's what they were thinking. But instead, I knew that. I kind of imagined what they were thinking, and I said, no, I need your help. I want to make it the best department that when he comes back, he has the biggest bonus he ever had. And it was 1971, and it was women were coming to work in huge quantities now, and there was nothing to buy, to wear. Everything looked like men's clothes. And so things were made in America at that time mostly, and so I could jigger the assortments, and I could order and get it in time. And so when Harry came back, he got the biggest bonus he ever had, and he did share it with me, and I wasn't bonus eligible. And what happened from that was every day that I could see the sales, and I'd say what would sell and what would not sell, and I can go and play with that. I love data. I've always loved information, and in those days we had it on big spreadsheets, not in a Google or on Excel, but you had to figure it out. You had to lay it out and look at it, and things would come and appear to you that you could change, that you could fix. And when I know something's not working, I'm there to fix it. And I don't know how not to do that. And sometimes I shouldn't be doing that. Sometimes it's not my role. And I've learned that over time that I need to work alongside a lot of other people to do it. That goes a little slower sometimes, but it also makes for more meaningful change. And I've learned that along the way too. But it's very similar. Building a company and building a project like this and being part of a community and being part of a company are not very different. People are people, and they want to know what's going on, and they want to be included. They want to be part of the success. They want their little bit of that, what my teachers and my bosses let me do, and I try to do that. One of our most fun things is the summer interns that we have at our family foundation every summer. They add so much value. At the end of the summer, we ask them to show us their resume and what they wrote about their experience. They always undervalue what they did here because we let them pick a project, but we save up these projects for that fresh brain that comes with so much open-mindedness. And they do. One student, WashU student, did a project on all of the housing, low-income housing in the city of St. Louis, senior, low-income, all of it. We have a whole gigantic project on this. Who knew? The mayor didn't even have it. That no one had done that. And so when we get mad at neighbors who don't want any more of it, we say, why don't they want it? Look where they live now. Well, that's why, because it's oversaturated. There's no balance of economic income. And in neighborhoods like this, for instance, when retailers or people want to come and they look at the income, they go, that's not enough for us. Well, all these people that live here spend their money, and they spend it somewhere else. They spend it at Target, or they spend it 5 miles away at the mall, or they're spending their money. They don't have any choice to spend it here. So how do we change that story? And I have that business mind and that business curiosity to dig into that data and use that data for good, for making better decisions. And we've done that here. In fact, we had students from WashU help us do the project on the economic development of this project. What did the neighbors want? And they were totally objective, these kids. They went out and they did all the research, they did the study, and that's why we have a bank, that's why we have a deli, that's why we have the pharmacy and the urgent care and the Edward Jones office, because that's what the neighbors said they wanted. Down to the name deli, not Delmar Divine, but they wanted a deli. And to them, they may have had a different opinion of what a deli was, but I think they meant sandwiches, breakfast, lunch, affordable, and it's an incredibly popular amenity in our neighborhood now, not just in our project. People come from all over St. Louis to eat at the Delmar Divine.
So not to jump too far ahead to where we are today, but on that topic, are the retail concepts here at Delmar Divine successful in your eyes?
Yes, they're new. We just are about a year old with the retail, but yes, they're doing well, and I think they're meeting their expectations. In fact, the St. Louis Community Credit Union told me that they've made about almost $1 million worth of loans since they opened a year ago fall, in this neighborhood. There was nobody to do that. So those people that are getting home improvement loans, car loans, small business loans, that's the proof is in the over time. And I remember how hard it was for me. I couldn't even borrow money for Build-A-Bear. I was a woman, even though I'd run a multi-billion-dollar company before I started my own. It was just crazy. And that was 1996. So I don't want that to happen to other people. And there's so many incredible ideas that our young people have on their college campuses after they leave college, but they don't exactly always know where to start. And hopefully these kinds of communities where there's affordable shop openings or places to put your services, whether it's a bank or it's an ad agency, there's lots of people to serve to be served.
You just gave me something to think about. Community banks, I deal with a lot of community banks in my business, and they're always about the communities they serve. But if your community doesn't have a bank, how is your community getting served? I've never really thought about that before.
Yes, it's a real big issue, and they don't have it, so they go all over the place, and that banker doesn't necessarily feel connected to that person, and they probably can't get a mortgage from that bank because the bank might be in Clayton and they live in 63112, and that Clayton banker isn't going to think that the value of the land in 63112 is anywhere close to what he can be using that money for in Clayton.
And we're literally, for people that don't know, we're 10 minutes from Clayton. Is that fair to say?
Not
Less
even.
than that?
I live in Clayton, and it takes me 7 minutes to get here every day.
So there you go.
Yeah, it's very close. And that's one of the other things about St. Louis. I had a visitor here from Harlem last week, and she works in Harlem and it does development in Harlem. And I took her all over St. Louis, from the airport to here, from here north to the NGA. And this looks like Harlem 9 years ago. And I don't think we think about that. I don't think we realize that we can take the cultural opportunity of St. Louis, the history, and bring it alive, and also bring other cultures to the table here. Because when you go to Harlem, you don't just eat soul food. You're eating, there's all kinds of food there and all kinds of people living there because diversity is welcome. It was part of its culture. And so how do we bring that culture back here in St. Louis? Because this neighborhood here, the West End it was called, and it's still called the West End, was an immigrant neighborhood. And people came here to work before the World's Fair, to work on the World's Fair. There were synagogues and churches right next to each other. In fact, the church across the street, Grace and Peace, was a Jewish synagogue. And right behind us was Visitation Academy. And then the YMHA, Young Men's Hebrew Association, is on Union. And Soldan High School had a large propensity of Jewish students that were graduating from there. So, these are all things that God doesn't care who's operating in that church, that place of worship, just as long as somebody's still praying to someone, to their God, and helping the world be a better place. And so I always think that's kind of a really good tell when there's lots of houses of worship that you could convert to different houses of worship, but also to community spaces. The Union Congregational Church, which is on Union and Enright, is the Union Choir. They found a way to be even more than a church, and they support theater and music and have all kinds of. They have an art gallery in there. What a wonderful thing to think about, and that church is thriving versus other churches that may be falling behind. We could get into a million ideas of what's possible in St. Louis with all the archives that we have and the amenities that we have that we don't also play up. But this, to me, this location that we're in right now on Delmar is Hollywood and Vine in St. Louis. It's near to everything, and that's why the retail that we have here and the number of people that work here are so strong is because it's easy to access. It's close to everything, and it also, the parking helps, the transportation helps, but people get it. It's not like a hard decision to come on to Delmar. It might be harder to go north of Delmar. We're working on that. But over time, as we keep expanding and there's more housing and more beautiful apartments that people can live in, and some of these buildings are just magnificent. In New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, they would be worth millions, just an apartment, not the whole building. And people here have not appreciated that history. When I first came to St. Louis, I bought a house in Lafayette Square. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because I came from Washington, D.C., where I couldn't have afforded anything like that. But I had a townhouse in a beautiful historic neighborhood like my Georgetown was, and I couldn't afford to live there. So I would say that we don't realize the tremendous opportunity that we have, especially in the city of St. Louis. But whether you choose to live north, south, east, or this is the West End, there's plenty of opportunity to improve what exists and make it at least as good as it used to be, whatever that used to be was, but better.
I fully agree with you. I'm not from St. Louis, so I take every opportunity I can to tell people how great St. Louis is. You have a metro area that has great bones, one, and then two, it has cultural amenities that a city of its size would never have because of its significance, 100 years ago. So just like you're saying, I think St. Louis can be great. I think it will be great. And that's what's kept me here, because I don't really have necessarily ties that kept me in St. Louis. I decided to be here. I could have been anywhere. When you moved to St. Louis, aside from your job keeping you here, I would imagine you could have gone anywhere afterward, but you stayed. Is that the reason why you stayed, because of the potential here?
Well, lots of circumstances come to play. I was here. I didn't even know where St. Louis was on the map. I had to look it up when they told me I was moving to St. Louis. I had an idea, but I had never been this far west. And I said, I'll be there for a couple of years. I'm moving up the company ladder. They have stores all over the country. But I did like it here because I could have a house. I could own something right away, and I wasn't making very much money. I could work near downtown. I could walk to restaurants. Even then in Lafayette Square, we had cute restaurants. And the people there that were rebuilding their houses had a sense of history of St. Louis, even if they weren't from St. Louis. So that was a reason. But then I met my husband, and that was another reason to stay. But this was the headquarters of the May department stores. So we had May Company corporate offices. We had Famous Bar. We had venture stores. And there was lots of room for me to grow in this particular city, and that's how.
Just real quick on that, for folks that don't know, because I don't know, and I didn't know until I did the research. May department stores would be the equivalent of what today?
Well, it was bought by Macy's,
okay.
So it was. There used to be department store chains all across the country, and what they did, Macy's and May and others, bought up local department stores that were historically built in towns like St. Louis, and then made them part of a corporate membership, so to speak. May Company had stores all over, and this was our corporate headquarters in the Railway Exchange building, which makes me really sad but optimistic about what that building can be again, because I went to work there every day, and it had beautiful windows and elevators and office spaces, just lovely, it was so convenient, so I know that it's possible, and it's not so much that we can't bring people back to work downtown. I'm not sure about all the retail that you need around it, that whether or not there's enough out there that's really successful enough that would want to be in a downtown environment, and that wouldn't be a chain store, if you will. All the chain stores. What those chain stores started as one small company, whether it was Build-A-Bear or Banana Republic, or they started as one store, and then somebody turned them into a chain and made them more commercial and more instead of unique.
Sure.
And so I think that there's a real big opportunity for people to be starting new retail companies that have a new personality and a new persona and appeal to the customer today. And they're popping up around, but I don't know that there's as many nosy people as me traveling around the country looking for those and saying, I want that in my mall. They don't need to have thousands of stores. They just need to have a few hundred at the most. So they're always special. I remember I went to Miami from one of my high school reunions, and I went shopping. And I was excited to go to Coconut Grove. It was a neighborhood right near where I lived. And every store was the Gap or Banana Republic or, all these stores that I had in St. Louis. And I was disappointed that there weren't more local stores to buy something unique that I could not see in my own hometown. So I think that that's another thing that we crave, is that uniqueness. And we go on vacation. We have Build-A-Bear stores in so many vacation locations, because when people go on vacation, they go looking to do something different and to bring something home that's a memory of that. And that's what Build-A-Bear is a memory of that. But I would say that here, too, at Delmar Divine, we're building memories where people are working together like they haven't worked before, which was my main goal, to build a place and a space where people could come together instead of, living all disparate places all over the city and not being able to work together. And that's what we're building, is a community here of people working together. And it's happening faster than I thought, because the place is more important than I thought. I thought, okay, I can build a space, but it's going to be all about the people. But the people can't act the way they want to act if they don't have a place to have the meeting, to bring other people together to have the meeting, that they can find a place to eat, bank, go to the doctor when they need it. So we have 670 people that have a pass to get in this building that work here. That's a lot of people post-COVID. And we have 235 people that live in the apartments, and they're all full. So this is good. And those people go to the deli and go, take the bus and, you buy other things in the community. And this was an empty building for probably about 10 years, mostly empty. And if it was occupied by doctors' offices when they had that here, fewer employees than what are working in these same rooms now.
It sounds like you really love building, whether that's building a business, building real estate, whatever the case is. And I know you're obviously very strategic the way you were able to scale Build-A-Bear and some of your other endeavors. So was the ability to build again one of the factors for wanting to jump into Build-A-Bear after having such a distinguished retail career? I know there's a Beanie Baby story that kind of comes into play here as well, but I would imagine as you work up or go up the corporate ladder, you're less involved in the building phase or maybe being able to be creative. Is that one of the reasons why in your 40s you decided to take the risk of entrepreneurship?
Well, I was very entrepreneurial working for the May Company. We owned Payless Shoe Source, and I was the president of that for 4 years. And we grew from one store, Payless Kids, to all across the country within our own company. There's lots of things. I was doing entrepreneurship on somebody else's nickel, so I knew I was always good at it. That's why I was successful. I had ideas, and I was willing to try them and then scale them. And when you're doing it on somebody else's money, it might seem a little bit easier because it's not your money, it's not your risk. But if you aren't successful, don't have a job anymore. So there is a risk involved. But I was always good at that. And again, back to loving to go on field trips and seeing how things are made. I ask a million questions. I don't just go into it without, it's my idea and I'm doing it. That's not it. You really need to have community involved, whoever that community is, your customers. And my first board of directors for Build-A-Bear was children. But I left May Company when they spun off Payless as a separate company, and I was going to finally I said, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's 1996, and the world is changing rapidly with the use of computers, and everything was becoming high-tech versus high-touch. And I felt it was time. Still people wanted that connection, and that doing something for children, I had a really big idea. That was complicated because of children's privacy. But I love this idea of a child walking into a store, and the door would know because of a little badge the child had that said, "Hi, Mary, how are you? Welcome back. How is did you finish that book that you bought here?" Things like that kids would feel welcome. Because it's when you go to a store and they say hi to you, or it's your birthday and they give you a special gift, you feel special. And we've kind of forgotten some of those things, even more so lately post-COVID than pre-COVID. But so I wanted to create that special place. And what I wanted to do was really expensive. I was talking to Microsoft about it, and we didn't even have all the COPA laws and things for children's privacy that we have now. But imagine how much information we could have gathered, and we would have only used it for good. But then that Katie and Jack and I went looking for Beanie Babies after school one day, and when she couldn't find the one she wanted, and she said, these are so easy. We could make these. The light bulb. I had a light bulb Willy Wonka moment in my head, which I had for every other idea I had prior, and had for the same thing here. I can see it really clearly in my head, and then it's easier to write that business plan to make that vision, come through. And vision, it's a real vision. I can go and sketch it, not perfectly, but I can kind of give you an idea of what it looked like. And the kids went down to pull out all the craft supplies because that's what they thought we were going to do, and I went upstairs and was Netscaping because it was very slow, and looking for a business I could buy because I didn't think you had to invent it. And that's another thing that I tell people, that there are a lot of businesses that there's an owner looking to sell that business, and you could take it, an existing business and something that you're interested in, and turn it into a 21st century business. How many stories have we heard? Bob Clark, who's the owner of Clayco, it was his family business, but it was a small business. I think it was a painting contractor. And look what he turned it into. Wow. Imagine those. There's so many businesses looking for a new owner. We were just talking about that before. And what a person with vision and caring for human beings and seeing possibility could create from that existing business. I couldn't find one. I did try. There were several businesses that were in the manufacturing of teddy bears, but they wouldn't sell to me. They thought I was crazy. So Katie said, "Why don't we do it?" And I thought, why not? Why not? There was no reason not to, really. And we went about doing it. And 9 months later, we opened our first store at the St. Louis Galleria. This project, from idea to reality, was about 9 years. So when you're trying to do good and save a building and save a neighborhood, it's a little bit more complicated than just opening one store. Even if I had a business plan for, I should have brought it in here. I have a bound copy of my business plan, a 10-year business plan that was well laid out, that I had to convince myself first that it's worth doing before you could convince the banker the landlord, all the other people that you have to talk about in a process of building a business. But I knew how to do it on somebody else's nickel. I just had never had to do it myself. But I wasn't alone. I could call everybody I ever knew in the May Company. And that's what I did do. I said, could you give me a place for somebody who I could talk to about logistics? Could you give me, because it was all around me. I didn't have to do any of that. I didn't have to worry about the warehouse. I didn't have to worry about how things got there. They gave us a purchase order. You gave it to the vendor. It told them where to ship it. Everything was pretty much laid out. And unless you were in that department, you didn't really have to dig in too much, even though I probably dug in more than most because I was nosy, wanted to know how it worked. But it isn't that complicated. I think people make things overly complicated. Everything doesn't have to be on this. Build-A-Bear was one store. This was, yes, 9 buildings, and it was a big project real estate-wise to take over. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was all the technical stuff to build it and reimagine it and make it safe for the 21st century, get rid of all the bad things that were in the building and put in the good things, make it seem more connected than just buildings that were cut and pasted together. You know this as a person who works in development. But that's the fun of figuring it out. It's like a big, giant puzzle, and we work on that. That's how we think about it, is one piece at a time. How can we connect those two pieces, those two people? This room here, we have many, many meetings to bring people together who are want more help on what they're doing and are willing to work with somebody else, but don't know who those people are. We can do that. That's one of the advantages of being a mature person. I've met a lot of people in my life, and that's the easiest part of what I do, is connecting someone to each other so they can do 1 + 1 = 100. It doesn't always have to be me. And sometimes 1 + 1 can be 1,000 when it's the right people getting together and have the speed and the financial wherewithal to act more quickly for the good of St. Louis. But overall, ideas come from everywhere. Wherever I go, I'm looking for an idea. I'm taking a picture. Now that we have these devices, I can take a picture of it, so I don't have to forget it. And I remember going into stores, copying, looking for ideas in a retail store, and you had to have a little tiny camera, and then you had to wait to get it developed. And now you can nobody even stops you to ask you what you're doing. And I just put them in my file. I have a folder of ideas, and I'll use them eventually. Although maybe the right project hasn't come to me yet. But I see, as I travel around St. Louis, I could talk about this forever. So many potential projects based on the history and culture of the neighborhood where that building is or was or is falling apart in. And I'm working on that. That's one of my next goals. After we finish phase 2 here, is I have a couple of ideas of how we can further bring opportunity from all over the country, actually, into the heritage of St. Louis, because it's part of our heritage. And I work with Arch Grants. I'm on the board of Arch Grants, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs at Washington University. That's where it's at. It's a network for teaching entrepreneurship, which is in high schools, is encouraging these young people to stay vested in St. Louis and to realize that their idea if my idea could come to be in St. Louis, their idea could come to be in St. Louis too. There's nothing in the way of that. Just you have to be willing to write a plan and move and groove with that plan. And most people write a PowerPoint now. They don't really write a detailed plan. But if you aren't convinced and you don't know what you're doing, you won't know what you don't know, and you won't hire the right people to help you do what you don't know. And that's one of my other strengths, is I know what I don't know, and that's related to the curiosity. But I'm always willing to learn, and I feel that's what maybe my biggest strength is. My superpower is the curiosity, but my strength is I know I don't know it all, and I'm learning it every day from the people that live in this neighborhood, the young people that work in this building, the students that I come in touch with. They keep you moving and they keep you young. And I hope I did that for people too when I was in their place, that I was sharing what I learned. And I have so many young friends, a young art student at Washington University who was here this summer working in in an entrepreneurial company, not here at Delmar Divine, but in St. Louis through the Scandalaris Center. And he called me up after the meeting and he said, I have an idea. And he came over and met me and he showed me what he does. His name is Mac Barnes, and he's a quilter, but not a quilter that you would wear on your bed, like a warm quilt. He does art. And he's actually a computer science major. And when he came to St. Louis, he's a sophomore. When he came to St. Louis as a freshman, he discovered that he could use computers in art as well. And he had a background. His mother, his grandmother, his family members were artists. And so he started to put that to work. But he had an idea to do a quilt based on the history of Delmar Divine that we could use here. And that's going to come to be this year. And he went and found a grant, and he has an idea. And and we're going to bring neighbors and students from Crossroads High School, and everybody's going to come together. So this will be like an old-fashioned quilt where people used to sit and quilt together and tell stories. Women who were doing this, they were telling a family story. We're going to tell a story not necessarily of our families, but of other families that have lived here and live here today. So we're very excited about that project. And it just takes a minute, to make a connection. And all that will be done in probably by the time that we would have met for a year. So he came here last summer, and we'll have it done by then probably. And so, or close to that. And you say, see, that's not very long, right? A year is nothing in the life of a student or in the life of a community like Delmar. So, what a blessing it is for me actually to be able to take a student's idea like that and then help him bring it into reality. But it benefits our community in more ways than I can even imagine right now, even sitting, and I have a big imagination.
I'm really happy to see just how passionate you are about every business that you go into, because it sounds like real estate has a full grip of you right now, just in terms of the various ideas you have, not only with Delmar Divine, but also with some of your future projects. And I'm really tempted to jump right into real estate because that's the business I'm in. But we had listeners and viewers who had a couple more questions about Build-A-Bear before we jump into Delmar Divine. So with Build-A-Bear, your first store at the Galleria, still there today, 25 plus years later, correct?
Almost 27.
You mentioned the business plan. Your first business plan, you planned for, I think it was 3 years out at the time, wanting to be in a particular mall or retail district for the 100th anniversary of the teddy bear. So that level of detail that you had in that business plan, is that what you maybe attribute some of your success to? And then also, is that the type of detail you had with Delmar Divine, any other future endeavors?
Yes. I think in complete stories, and then you have to work backwards. And so that story doesn't always exactly look like what you said it was going to look like. But we started Build-A-Bear in 1997, and the 100th anniversary of the teddy bear was going to be in 2004. So when we were working on we had our first store open. It was very successful, and landlords were wanting us to be in their mall. And Roosevelt Field, which is in New York metro area on Long Island, is a very, very popular mall, very successful. And we wanted to be there in sort of record time by 2004. Or actually 2002, I think it was. And we worked with Simon to say that's what we want. And they gave us a store a year before, but it wasn't in the best location and it wasn't going to be big enough. And we told them all of our plans for the grand opening and how we were going to tell the story. And so they found us a better location, and we did open it in that year. And so that was just sort of milestones inside the plan. There were many of those, though, because we wanted to cover certain cities. We wanted to be there when that mall opened or that event was going on. That was a national event. I'm a history person. I love all those things. I want to help teddy bears tell the story. You might know that Gigi is the bear that just went into the spaceship. This is her second trip around on the spaceship. We like to participate in things like that are educational and fun and kind of a little bit, why would they take a teddy bear into space? Why not take a teddy bear into space? She has her own space outfit and everything. It is just part of who we are, and that's been the culture since we started. When our first sport, I love sports. I would love basketball.
Yes,
My next door neighbor was a basketball coach at the University of Miami. Has nothing to do with my height. It's just the skills that you learn. And our first sports license was with the NBA. And one of my investors would love basketball too. He said, I'm going to introduce you to people at the NBA. And we went there, and it was like kind of the most exciting day. They had no idea that I had this basketball history and that I knew so much about basketball. But that was we were a little teeny company, and they agreed to do that. We were a little teeny company. In 2001, we went into Disneyland. And Disney then said, we want you to make all of our licensed products. And we make many, many, many of them. We had to float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. We had a plan for that. But I didn't know exactly when it would happen, but it did happen. And famous people like the Jonas Brothers and Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber were on our float. And we sort of were part of their career too, and they loved Build-A-Bear. They didn't think it was corny to be on the Build-A-Bear float. They thought it was cool to be on the Build-A-Bear float. So you can create cool, you can create fun, you can create, and every single endeavor, whether it's a real estate project or a building that you're starting, or a business that you're starting in the mall, can be fun for the consumer and fun for for you. If it's not fun for you and the people that work for you, why would they do it in today's world?
Your first partnership was with the NBA, and that was through an investor. He made a few connections for you, which I think is a great story. And it really speaks to what you were saying in the beginning. A lot of your connections or people you knew were what helped you with Build-A-Bear. Were those connections also what helped you work through situations that maybe were challenging? For example, I would imagine finding a manufacturer was hard, and I believe you found a manufacturer in China. And then also you had a warehouse in North City early on where you lost, I think, all of your inventory. Were connections what helped you navigate some of those situations?
Well, yes, always it's about the people that surround you and who you hire to surround you, who can help you resolve problems. If you know everything, you will be in serious trouble. You'll hit something where you don't know. But I built up over the 25 years of working with the May Company tons of relationships. I merchandised areas that had toys and plush slippers, and so when I went to do this, I knew who to call. But I wasn't sure they would do it because usually minimums are very high, and we only had one store. We didn't really know exactly how many we were going to buy of any one thing. But I went to people that were, I guess, people that I work with. Little did I know, deep inside, they were also wanting to do something different, and nobody ever brought that idea to them. They were manufacturers, so they weren't retailers themselves. And when I brought an idea to them that they loved, and they thought, oh, my kids will even like this, they were happy to help me. So those were long-standing relationships. They just made something else. The people that made our shoes for bears made shoes for humans. So they were very happy to help. And, they said they would invest in the beginning, not invest, give me cash, but they would make the minimum that I needed. We worked out some things. Sometimes it was 200, sometimes it was 500, sometimes it was 1,000. But we worked around it. I figured, well, the worst thing is if I have to throw it in the trash because it didn't sell. But that didn't happen. You mentioned the warehouse that was in North St. Louis. The roof caved in. We were on the first floor. Everything we had came, fell down. The dust and the dirt and everything fell down on our stuff. We couldn't even get to it for weeks to take an account of it. And that was everything we had bought from the store opening in October to Easter, because we knew the Chinese New Year's in there and delivery. So we thought it's what we thought. But it was actually a blessing in a weird way, because my vendor said to me, just let me know what you want to order. We'll make it in the sample room and we'll ship it to you. We'll ship it to the store because you don't have the warehouse right now. So I went home and I looked at all of our selling reports, and believe it or not, well, it's not so hard to believe. Not everything was selling. We were doing great. We were surpassing our plans, but some things were going to sell out anyway. And so he said, just reorder the things that you think are going to sell. Don't worry about the things that weren't. But what was left in the store were some of the things that had not sold before. But by the time the new stuff came in, all of it was gone. The bad things were gone, and the new things were turning really quickly. So I probably wouldn't have looked at those reports until after Christmas in real depth, because I knew we had all that inventory to sell, and I was just thinking, we had enough to fill up the shelves. And I had a vision when I got that phone call about the warehouse that we would have nothing on the wall. So those relationships, and the vendors all said, don't worry about paying us until you can. We'll ship it to you. We'll keep track of everything, and we'll pay. And that became the kind of terms that we worked on. We used to have to pay before it left China, and then it would get here, and then we get to our stores. But now we didn't have to pay for it till after we sold it, which was really great. A great way for cash flow. Everyone was so kind and so helpful, but it wasn't based on one relationship. It was based on years of knowing me and knowing that I didn't cause this problem, and it wasn't something stupid that I did, other than I didn't have the right kind of insurance. We finally did get paid about 5 years later, but luckily we had investors and we had the vendors who were supporting us. And our landlord would say, "Don't worry about the rent. You can pay us back. You can back pay us soon." But that wasn't a problem. We had enough sales to do those things. Thank goodness, the business was booming. We just had to get that inventory back in stock. So that was a really good thing to happen in our first store, because if it had happened, we had 20 stores or 30 stores, it would have been really difficult to bring all that inventory back in. But that way they could help us and ship it. We're getting shipments every day, and it was all the good stuff, not the stuff that didn't sell.
Without that help from some of the vendors working with you, I'm sure that could have been a situation that essentially ended Build-A-Bear, with insurance paying 5 years later.
Could have. But I had enough. I had the financial resources also. Okay. But I did have an investor already, and somebody I didn't know. That's a wonderful St. Louis story also, who saw the story in the Business Journal in July and called me up and asked me if I was looking for investors. And I met with him the next week, and he said, "I'm ready. How much should I own of the company?" And we worked it all out, and he was a great partner. In fact, all the way to the IPO, we're at the last day of the IPO, and we're in Minneapolis, having met with investors, and he called me on the phone and said, "I don't want to sell." I said, "Barney, we have to sell. We already sold it. We've basically been on the road selling." He says, "I don't want to sell. I still want to be a part of Build-A-Bear." And I said, "We'll always be a part of Build-A-Bear, but this is a pro rata share." And he the next morning he called me and he said, "I won't screw it up. I'm in." But that was such a wonderful statement on his part. He wanted to still be a part of Build-A-Bear. And I think, like me, now that I'm the age he was when he was doing that, I'm thinking that's how you stay connected. You invest in young people. You invest in people who you think have promised to get things done in the world, and that's what I do too. And it's a wonderful joy to be able to, even when they fail, the failing's part of the process. I didn't have that problem because I didn't start Build-A-Bear until I was 48 years old. I had a lot of experience. I knew the signs of things turning bad, and I knew the signs of we got to buy more. The customer demand is there. They don't know that. They sometimes start a business too young without the life experience and don't have the money to hire the person with all the experience that could help them, or finding that right chemistry with a person that you really trust. So trust is a big missing sometimes in business endeavors, and people don't know who to trust, and they're afraid to share their idea. I was never afraid to share my idea. That's how it got to be so good. In fact, we haven't made everything that customers suggested to us over the last 27 years. We still have a lot of content to go. And that is really, that's a wonderful reservoir of information is your customer.
You mentioned trust, and earlier in the conversation, we talked about the caring and inclusion. So I'm sure that was all part of the culture you built at Build-A-Bear. What are you taking from there in terms of the way you built the culture and the customer experience? Because for anyone that's not aware, you were a pioneer in what we'll call experiential retail. What are you taking from there that you're applying today to the real estate endeavors?
Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing is true. I mean, people want to have an experience. And there are all kinds of experiences. When you check into a hotel, how they treat you, and when you go to an airport, how they treat you. And some of those are pretty lousy. And, before you get to the hotel of your dreams, you've had 14 missteps because of the airport and the traffic and whatever. How does that turn into something positive? And we all have a big challenge in that. But that's the fun of it, is wowing the customer. And most of the time, it's nothing fancy. As we started our conversation talking, we think it is, but it isn't. It's just it's the ability for them to do their work or shop or in a place that's pleasant, that people are friendly to them. It's really the little things that matter, the things that people notice. And as a woman, I noticed them all my whole life. I mean, one of the things I do when I was looking for a mall location for Build-A-Bear, I went to the mall bathrooms. Are they clean? Are they neat? Are people in there? Are people complaining about them? What kind of customer shops here? You go into the places that people wouldn't. You don't think the landlord knows too much about, and then you find out a lot about it. And it's the same thing in a school. When you go into a school, what do the bathrooms look like in that school? Are the mirrors broken? Is the water running? Is there hot and cold water? Is all the toilet out of order? Are they working? What does that say about a building and a building manager and a building person who's responsible? And I think that's just human. That's what we all would want, right? That isn't anything fancy. That's just sort of expected. But if the expected is better than expected, it's a wow. And that's what we should do. And everybody who works in a place should be wowing others. What we find here is that actually people feel welcome here. One Sunday I was here on a Sunday and working, and a neighbor calls me. She doesn't know I'm here. She lives right behind us here. And she said, "Maxine, I'm really worried about the neighborhood." And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, there's some people getting off the bus. There's a lot of people getting off the bus and coming in your building, and they don't look like people that should be in this neighborhood." And I said, "Well, I'm here, Kim. Why don't you come over and we'll go see." And I knew exactly what it was. Edward Jones was having a financial empowerment class, and they had brought in great speakers. And they had lunch, and they invited 150 people to come. More than 150. 150 people came to this Sunday lunch meeting, and people brought their families, and there were family activities. And she came in, and her mouth hung open, and she says, "I'm sorry. I had no idea." I said, "These are people that aspire to live here, that go see your house from the street, and they go, I want to live in a house like that. That's how I was when a little girl riding my bike." And she said, "You're right. I'm so sorry. Who am I to have said that?" And I think that's one of those things that people, they, at least because they feel comfortable telling me what makes them mad and what makes them happy, we can solve it. But if you never know and you never ask, you'll never be able to make it more pleasant or repair the damage that might have been done. And so you can see me anytime picking up trash, because this is like a wind tunnel here. It can be windy and trash comes from and I'll go, we have trash cans everywhere, and people will see me. And she told me one day, she says, I saw you picking up trash. Do you have time to just have a cup of coffee? I said, sure, come over. Those are things that make a difference. So the little things, it's no effort for me to bend down and pick up the trash.
It's very powerful, though, to see you do that. I wasn't aware of the extent to which you're involved in the daily operations here, and I think that's incredible.
I'm not in charge of the trash, but I am in charge of the trash. I don't want people to work in an environment that they think looks musty or dirty, and of course, since COVID, people are afraid to pick up anything dirty. But you can go wash your hands after you've done it, so. But that, and also opening up our rooms, our meeting rooms we have tons of them here. They're meant for our tenants, and they mostly are used by our tenants, but our tenants have partners outside of the Delmar Divine, and they can also come to the meeting. And we do things for Black History Month, and we do things for training, and we do all kinds of things here that we thought of some of them, but we didn't think of all of them, and many of them have come from the ideas of our tenants that we wouldn't have even known they had, because we never met with them as often as we could have. Even if I was a donor to that charity, I just didn't know everything that they were doing. And we've had new people come here, new employees that come here that are so happy to be here. 670 people work in an office building that was built after COVID, and they come to work here. Not every day, because a lot of people work out in the field, but they're here, and they're proud to say they work here, and that really matters to me. That as a building owner, you have to keep things up. People want to be proud of where they live and what they do. So we're trying to create the same environment here on a much tighter budget than we had at Build-A-Bear, and I thought that was a tight budget.
So in terms of Delmar Divine and what you have going on today, before we talk, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing some of the future plans, I'd love to hear them, but it sounds like, based on what you said, some of the strong traits that you have as a leader are leading by example and really listening to people, making yourself accessible. Would you say that's some of the most important skills or traits that a leader should have, or is there any piece missing there?
No, I think that is important skills. My bosses were always available to me. I think that maybe they thought, well, she doesn't know what she's doing, so we have to make sure we help her. But that wasn't always the case, because I moved up the ladder. But they were always there for me. You might have to make an appointment, but if I had an idea or a question, I just had to have it well thought out. And not necessarily in a formal business plan, but sometimes it was. That was part of what we learned, and we strategized our departments every year. We had a business plan, and we were held to those results in order to move forward and get raises and promotions, et cetera. So that's really what it is. And sometimes they're formal, like a business relationship, and sometimes they're not. They're just your neighbor or your friend or your friend's daughter that you've known since you was a child, and you want to help be successful, or help if they need something, whatever it is. Sometimes they need a recommendation on a doctor, or they need a recommendation on a real estate agent. There's a ton of things that they're so easy to come up with. People aren't asking you to write them a check for $1 million. Very rare that anybody, I'm not saying people haven't asked me for that, but for the most part, it's not the young people that I advise. It's really what they need, or the connections to get whatever it is that they need done. And so we keep moving along on that path. But it isn't, not every project has to be this big. Mm-hmm. As I said, Build-A-Bear started with one store. I happened to be able to purchase this plot of land for a reasonable price. It wasn't that part that was the expensive part. It's the, remodeling and renovation that costs so much, and then making sure that you can afford it, that you can pay for it, that, you're not going to close it 2 years after you open it. That's a whole nother, story that happens sometimes in projects like this, or that other people want to come and buy it from you, and they won't operate it the same way that you will. But we have it set up differently here so that it will be this forever. It'll always need to be, painted and touched up. But we hope that the second phase, which will be, more offices and apartments, will make this more permanent and make it. It's a whole city block. It's really pretty special to have found this. And once when I thought I couldn't get it, people tried to talk me out of it because they said, oh, there's smaller buildings you can find. No, it has to be here. This is a corner. It was an important corner. It was a big hospital. Famous people were born here. This is going to be what's going to change the way people think about Delmar, and it has done that. I rarely hear people talk about the divide anymore. I think we've done a good job of that, and of course all the other things that are coming down Delmar. But now the next divide is Page Avenue and then Martin Luther King, and moving north, we will fix those too.
Are you thinking of doing future projects that are similar to this one?
No, different. But yes, a renovation, a reimagination of a building. One of the things that I believe strongly in St. Louis is its history and culture. And as a businesswoman, I didn't even, I knew about them, but I didn't know deeply about Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Malone, that they were the first two millionaires. And they happened to be black women from St. Louis. And they were in the beauty business, and I was a merchandiser. I merchandised beauty in my career, and I knew about them. And so I really thought, at the same time I had the idea for this building, I had an idea for another building in the Ville where we would become an incubator for black beauty businesses all over the country to come here and be the place they would ship from, produce from, everything. Because we had a lot of manufacturing here opportunity as well. And so I still want to do that. I know more about them now than I knew about them then, and I know more about the Ville than I knew then, and it's so much a part of its history and culture. It's our Harlem, if you will. And how can we reinvigorate from our history, from things that happened here, from icons that lived here and started an industry? How could we go back and play that up and be known for that without it happened. I mean, it's a fact. So we didn't make the most of that, I don't think, because I think they were black women, and it wasn't as well known as it should have been. But in the beauty business, they're well known, and they happened here in the Ville. So I think that's an opportunity for us that I'm working on. I have a building that I can see that becoming that. I have no idea inside if it needs $100 million or $10 million, but soon I'm going to be doing that. Soon I'm going to get further into it so I can know that. And I've already started some of the work on it. And then one of our tenants here is I Thrive, who has vans that go around and does eye checkups at school, and they have a van. They moved here because they wanted to be part of this community, but we didn't have a place for their van. And as I've known her and have talked, she belongs to an agency, a group called Mobile Health Vehicles Association, and it's actually based in St. Louis, the national organization. And we were talking about this, and I said, well, maybe we could build a hub for these vehicles that do such good. They bring healthcare to people. And we could build it so that we would have room for like maybe 20, and we'd have a gas station on one end and a car wash on the other, because those are really hard to get for a truck. You have to go all the way out to West County to get your truck washed. So, how could we bring that in and take some property, not necessarily in the city of St. Louis, might be in Normandy or on Page Avenue, and take an old car dealership or an old Midas muffler or Telly tire that has the bays and figure that out. So we're actually actively looking for a space for that. And it doesn't have to be here, but it needs to be in proximity because of the centralization. And we might not find a lot that will hold the gas station and the car wash, but we're working on that. And I think that that one is needed because these vehicles are really valuable, and you want to have them secure, and you want to have a place where the mechanic can also be there. So I'm thinking about put some feelers out to find a local young person who works in auto mechanics, talk to people at Rankin Tech. We would put them in business to help us. It would be their shop. I mean, they would own the car repair part of it. They would just be paying us rent, maybe not, because everybody has somebody that does that, and they're few and far between to find now. If you have a generator, it's hard to get the generator repaired. So we're learning all this. I mean, once somebody tells me about this, and I know how much good they do, and I know that we can bring healthcare to people, it makes a lot of sense. It's sort of not telemedicine, but sort of car medicine, auto medicine, you bring that vehicle there. So if we can make people healthier by bringing the healthcare to them, that already exists in our community, but make sure that the vehicles are safe and well taken care of and centrally located so they can get north, south, east, and west, just like they want to. So that's a project that sort of came to me this past year, but we're actively working on that for her, and that will bring other people together. and made it a lot easier when the National Association is right here in town, right? They have an interest in it as well. So maybe we could make it their headquarters too. Their offices would be there. Who knows? We're not that far, but we're just trying to find the space to make sure we can cover somewhere between 2 to 5 cars. And if we find a bigger space, because that's what they told us, you're not going to find a place that big. But I did see one. It's just way far north, and we don't want to be that far north. It needs to be more centrally located. So that's an idea. And the reason I'm telling you these, and I tell them to other people, is once you put it out there in the universe, people go, oh yeah, I have another idea for you, or you could do this, or let me introduce you to so and so. If you never tell anybody your ideas, it just sits in your little head, and it doesn't go as far as it could. And I think that's one of the reasons I've always done that. Build-A-Bear I shared with kids and people, and they added so much more value. This project, people told me people that could move here. By the way, you can appreciate this. We thought we were going to open a lot earlier than we did because it was so much more complex, but we leased it to a whole group of people in the office space, and then they needed to move faster than we were moving, so we had to start leasing it again. And it ended up working out really, really well. That the tenants that we have, a third are education, a third are mental health and health in general, and then a third are community development. And you need all those things to repair a community that's lived through so many things like St. Louis, and we will get there. We will get there because we have all of those things here represented in the building. Now, there's many more that make up a community, but they all have tentacles with all those organizations, so we can bring people together pretty quickly. In an emergency, if we had one, hopefully we won't have too many, but in a problem-solving opportunity that we might see on literacy or on this vehicle challenge. The other idea, the Innovative Center for Beauty in St. Louis. I wish we would have started this earlier, but through Arch Grants, we've also brought on several companies in the beauty business that I think would be great examples to thrive there. And you have to make it so that it's worth their while, because they're starting out, they have no money. So you have to have it funded properly, and that's a little bit more complex than just building a building and charging people rent.
I do want to be respectful of your time, but now that we're talking about the real estate piece, I have one more question for you before we wrap up. The way you're describing these projects, Delmar Divine and the future projects, first of all, they're very creative and very transformational by the sound of it, and we can see Delmar Divine is very transformational. Are these for-profit or nonprofit? And I ask that because if it's for-profit, I would imagine yourself and your stakeholders are taking a very long-term view in terms of your view for not only the building but the neighborhood. Would you mind sharing?
The vehicle station would be a for-profit more than likely because it can be. The beauty incubator could be parts of it could be because what I see in it is a distribution center that everybody could share, a packaging and all these kinds of resources that people could share. But I think we might start off like with a slightly different investment model than has been done. Like maybe have it started by people who have donor advised funds, that the money would come into this project. We would just keep reinvesting it. We would never pay it back to them. But $50,000 could become like, oh wow, now it's $500,000 because you're reinvesting it in the initiative that you're doing. And that really is what it takes. And when you're talking about entrepreneurs, those entrepreneurs would be for profit someday. But even at Cortex, which is meant to be for-profit businesses, only the companies like Microsoft and a few that are located there. It takes a long time in food science and healthcare and life sciences to make a profit. Retail is the fastest place to go. Consumer products, you can make a lot of money if you know what you're doing. The challenge is for real estate that people don't think they need a mall anymore. But I was in the mall yesterday, the Sunday before Valentine's Day. It was really busy. And I think we need new stores there, new ways for people, new reasons for people to come, maybe a new restaurant that people have been dying to go to that exists in a mall. And the malls are having to adjust to that new thinking because that's what, we don't need all the old stores. We all know what they are. And they aren't changing fast enough to make us happy. So we need some new things. And I think they're out there, but the landlord has to make an investment like they made in me, or take a risk. And say, okay, if she doesn't make it, we won't sue her for not fulfilling her lease. We'll be liberal on that, or having pop-up stores or a pop-up opportunity. But you don't want it to look like it just popped up. You want it to look like it's a serious business. So I love that. I love having those ideas and seeing. I meet young people all the time that I know could have a retail outlet, but they're afraid of that. Well, one thing they're afraid of is that they have to work in it. They have to work 7 days a week, 10 hours a day or whatever it is now. That's another thing they don't want. They think of retail. I don't want to be in the retail business, but they want to sell it from their, distribute it. The Instagram comes through in the night and they'll fill it in the morning and they don't have to work that many hours, but it's just as hard. And actually it's harder because you have to know that product exists to find it. But in a mall, you just walk by it and you see it and you say, oh, I want to go in there. It looks really inviting. So you have a sort of a built-in customer base it's more expensive, but I'm not sure. I haven't done the analysis. It's one of those projects I have for a college student to do. Is it really anymore with the cost of advertising and social media? That's less expensive than owning a store in a mall and letting thousands of people walk by it every day? I'm not sure. I don't know. But I used to be that it sounded like it was, but I don't think it necessarily is the biggest. The delta is as big as it once was because of the cost of advertising and finding your customers online and so many, what would I call them? Copycat products that, it looks like a name. I'm a big shopper. I buy something and that name is good. The packaging, it looks really good online and I get it and it comes in a white bag from China. And then I put a price on what I'm willing to pay, but I won't even use it because I'm not sure what's even in it. I don't even feel the trust. And yet a lot of those kinds of brands are infiltrating in America and they find one influencer to kind of just talk about it and it's not really genuine. And I think that's another thing about, luckily, Build-A-Bear has, and we have, real people that talk about what they get from being at Delmar Divine or that teddy bear. They tell me their teddy bear stories all the time. And some of them go viral. They put them out there themselves, and that helps us. But I would just say that you can't replace the real human story. And when you have it, you need to expand it, and tell everybody about it. Let people find it as easily as possible. So we're about that hug, whether it's a hug of a teddy bear or the hug of a neighborhood. And that part, the reward of that part of creating this project and becoming friends with so many people that live in this. I live just a few miles away, but I feel like this is where, when people say when I say my neighborhood, I mean this. I don't mean where I live in Clayton. I mean this. And I really feel like these are my friends, and these are people that I've known now for 10, 11 years that are prouder to live here than they were then because just a little thing that we've done or a big thing that we've done. They have been with my partner since day one. And I think the teddy bear part helped because when they found out I was Build-A-Bear, Mama Bear, they said, oh, she's a bear person. She can't be bad. And, they welcome me to the meetings, to the times, to discussions. And when they need a bear, I bring them a bear. Sometimes they don't tell me they need a bear, but I can see it in their eyes that something bad is happening, and I can make it a little bit easier. But it doesn't even. It's not bribery. It doesn't feel like that because it's what I would do. I give everyone bears. So I would say that I live a life I could not have imagined, and it's so much better because of all the people that add to it. I just feel like, how did I when you made me go backwards, I can see how I got here, but then you don't always see the connections immediately. But I'm a living, breathing example of it. And I think if more of us relaxed and just did what our heart told us to do instead of what we thought other people wanted us to do, we would be so much better off. And so would the world, and absolutely St. Louis would be, because there's many people like you and I that didn't come from here that absolutely love it and can see all the potential, and we're not giving up.
You said when you went to Florida, you saw the same stores that you saw in St. Louis, and you kind of touched on a bit of the today's retail environment now. If we were to look at, let's say, the past 30, 40 years in retail, we kind of went from Main Street to shopping malls and big box stores, and I feel like we're moving back to kind of like a sort of Main Street to where you have a Delmar Divine with some boutique shops in it or services, and then you have other mixed-use developments that have their own main streets, if you will. Do you think that's the future of retail with online shopping now, that you have to have kind of smaller, either boutique or experiential experiences?
Yeah. We can't have both. This place like St. Louis that has so many neighborhoods with those shop fronts that already exist that could be so cool. We can all imagine a great bakery, a place to have coffee. Food is also a big part, and we have 6 new restaurants coming to Delmar Maker District within the next 6 months. It's going to be really exciting, and we're already planning our taste of Delmar, how we're going to do it, and how we're going to bring people that have never been here before. So food is a good way. But then you need things like an eyeglass store, and you need and it could be a Warby Parker, it could be a Lululemon for athletics store, but I can see all these lifestyle brands that could be here because people want all that. They buy it. We already know where they shop. We can track them on their phones. We know they go to Plaza Frontenac and the Galleria and Target, and they're buying stuff. They're spending money. How do we get them to spend money closer to home? And what are those shops, and who are those vendors that would be willing to take that early risk? And when you say risk, you're sharing it with them. You're saying, okay, you'll have a reduced rent for the first, I'm making this up, the first 18 months you're here. And then it'll go up slightly, and or whatever it is that you work out. Or we'll help you with the build out. We'll give you tenant allowance, which everybody does in a mall. We couldn't have built Build-A-Bear if we didn't have our landlords helping us grow our store print faster. All these things you have to put into the plan. And a lot of people who think about real estate in the city don't think about that. You do as building apartments, because you have to put in kitchens and bathrooms and, amenities, washer, dryers, things like that. So you're thinking about what does the customer want? What is the basic needs that we can fill? And then some of the other stuff is just, like lacy edges, and I don't think it really means a lot, but it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't necessarily help, and it costs a lot of money. So you have to decide what is it that the customer really needs, and that's where we talk to the people all the time. What do kids want? What do the kids want in the neighborhood? Like one of the things that's happening at Forest Park, they're building basketball courts again. Mm-hmm. Kids wanted that. And I don't know what they were afraid of. We can all surmise that. But the fact is we have pickleball courts, and we have, right, this is in walking distance here. And then the park behind us, what can we do to improve this park and make it a multi-generational park? So there's things for the seniors in the neighborhood to do, and the things for the children to do in the park too, and make it safe and smooth. It's not very safe. It's not unsafe, but you could hit a rock and fall down. And somebody might not know you were in there for a while. We know that people tell us this, and then we share it with the powers that be. And then what can we do? What can we do to help? Can we go in the park and do a lawnmower day and clean it up? And we brought Shakespeare to the park, and that helps a lot, brings people to the park who have never been to the park. I didn't make up these ideas. I didn't invent teddy bears. Ray Kroc didn't invent hamburgers, and Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee. They just invented how to do it better. And think of all the things in this world that could be better if somebody just said, I want to work on orange juice, or I want to work on plastic mugs, or whatever it happens to be. And we need young people and people who've lived a life and have an experience with that product to say, yeah, I've always wondered about that. I'm going to go fix it. And fixing it makes it a new product. So that's really the opportunity that I see. Is it's almost staring us in the face, and it does take money, but mostly it takes will, and trust and confidence in yourself that you could do it, or that you could meet people that could help you with it. It does take time, and not everybody wants to spend as much time as it takes. But I was planning Build-A-Bear for 25 years. I just didn't know it.
The way a good friend of mine puts improving on existing products is building a better mousetrap, which I really resonate with that. I think that's what we kind of do with our company as well. To end the show, we have what we call a hole-in-one, which is just your greatest piece of advice for anyone that they can implement in either their life or business today. What would you say your hole-in-one is for our listeners and viewers?
Well, one of my things is about experience. If you want to own a restaurant, and you're a good cook and you've never owned go work in a restaurant. You don't have to work there for the rest of your life. Go work there for a year. They're desperate for people, so it's easy to do. If you want to work in retail, go find the store that you really think is the best in the business and go work there and understand what it takes to manage something like that. So you really know what the part that you don't know, what you're getting into. You're learning what you're getting into so that you can make it even better. And that's a lot of things that people don't have experience in, but that's part of your research. People say, did you do a lot of research? 25 years of working in the retail business taught me a lot about the consumer, and I asked a lot of questions all the time. So that's one thing. And then the other is don't ever lose your kid think. Like in my mind, when we were kids, when we said, Mommy, why can't we go there? Why not? Why, and people just are always trying to get us to do it in their time frame. We can't lose our why, like, why are we doing that? Or why not? And bring that back and think of the way you thought as a child, and things that you might have, you could come to mind and say, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. Write it down and see if anything out of that will bring you into a space where you can be more creative and more, not like in a box, like you're out of that box. And kid think is good because it was when we didn't know anything and we wanted to learn everything. And so we have to get back to that and thinking, seeing in our day-to-day life what's possible from that we take for granted. We just walk by it every day and we think, oh, that's all right. No, it's not. It's broken, and you could fix it. And it could be a multi-million-dollar business. It doesn't have to be a billion-dollar business or a unicorn business of any kind. It could just be a business that hires people, pays them. Build-A-Bear's done billions of dollars over our 27 years, but it does about what you said, about 500 around there somewhere, close every year. And it's a lot of business. And if you do it profitably, you can employ people and their lives can be better. And the children that get to hug a teddy bear of any age, 3 to 103, is our target market. It's a big target. It's joy every day. So I have it on all sides. I have it from my past life, of which I still have some connection to, of course, and then I have it from what I'm doing today, and I'm thinking of a hug as a hug. That keeps me grounded in this is all about doing good for people, and people need that hug. And St. Louis needs a hug. It deserves a hug. It's a great place to live, to work, and to play, and we have a lot of assets that we could make even better.
I love it. Great way to end the show. St. Louis needs a hug, and everyone needs a hug. Maxine, thank you so much for your time.
You're
Greatly
welcome.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.